Japanese can be so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Just do what you can to keep at it. That's the most important thing, is just being consistent. You don't have to have the perfect system. You don't have to listen to what people say about this is the only effective way to learn Japanese. That's just, I don't know how to say it other than it's just straight garbage.
Minasan, ohayou gozaimasu, konnichiwa, konbanwa. Bienvenida, bienvenido a contactojapon.com. Si te dedicas a una carrera creativa, fotografía, música, diseño, arquitectura, artes visuales, cocina, y buscas ideas, material o experiencias que te cambien la vida, te podemos ayudar. Soy Byron Barón, educador y promotor cultural, y quiero compartir lo mejor que guardo de más de 30 años en contacto con Japón, 15 enseñando su idioma y 9 diseñando experiencias en la Tierra del Sol naciente. Japón es mucho más que sushi, samurái y geisha. También es arte, disrupción y mucha, mucha creatividad. Japón para gente creativa.
Hi Lydia, thank you very much for being here with us. Minasan, ohayou gozaimasu, konnichiwa, konbanwa. Today we are on our second interview in English. As we have explained before, we usually publish all our information in Spanish, but this is a special program to prepare all those students wishing to study in Japan. So you do need to speak and understand English as much as possible. My English is not that good, but I try my best, and I invite native speakers for you to get used to intonation, speed, vocabulary, and all these resources we will need to study in Japan. So today we have Lydia. We have our guest is Lydia Beukelman, and she's gonna talk to us about her podcast, Business Success Japan. This is a very interesting and beautifully done podcast. I enjoyed very much the introduction, her voice, but especially the content, the most important thing, the content. So thank you, Lydia. Welcome to Contacto Japón. And here we are.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm definitely naturally more of an interviewer than somebody who likes to sit and answer questions and have somebody else ask me questions. So thank you for inviting me and for being such a kind host, as opposed to what I did to you, making you speak in your second language for an hour. Sorry about that. So yeah, I'm excited to share whatever I can to help your audience as well as they try to explore whatever Japan has to offer them in their futures.
Great. Lydia, tell us about your first contact with Japanese culture and the milestones in your path until your current position, your current job, or your current activity. Let us know, how was that first encounter? How was that first experience? And what made you fall in love with Japanese culture?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I don't have as much of a cohesive story as a lot of people do who seem to share their histories about Japan. But as a child, I was always somebody who loved to read books, who loved to make up stories, play make-believe and things like that. But I was from a very, I don't know how to say it other than very white part of the country. It was, everybody kind of had the same culture. Everybody had the same history, the same way of thinking. So I was always super fascinated with the idea that there were other places where people thought differently, and that, well, later on I learned people think differently and there's just different ways to think correctly. So from a young age, I was always interested in different, quote unquote, different worlds. As a child, that was playing make-believe, but then I discovered that there were different worlds in the world I was already in. So my first significant memory of Asian culture was actually visiting a Buddhist temple. And after that, I was just super fascinated with the culture. My earliest exposure to Japanese culture was probably Pokemon, to be honest. That's kind of a classic gateway into Japanese media. I got exposed to manga and anime later on, probably in middle school and high school, but I never became super obsessed. It was always just kind of on the periphery for me. But then when I got to college and I was thinking about seriously studying a different language, I really decided that I wanted to try to get out to East Asia. And because the most exposure I'd probably had was to Japanese culture in those small ways, I was like, okay, why not Japanese? So things just kind of blossomed from there. I feel like I almost fell into it rather than having this deep, profound movement towards Japan, but I'm very glad that it happened.
It usually happens like that, right? From, let's say, like a casual meeting or something. For example, in my case, was with karate. And other from in other experiences are from mostly from anime, but then it grows, and well, here you are. So when did you go to Japan? How did you get to visit Japan, and how it was that first experience there?
So my first visit to Japan was between my sophomore and junior year. I spent a summer there in the countryside. Excuse me, like the deep countryside. So the super
Inaka.
The super Inaka. That was definitely an experience.
Where was it?
Not Hakone, Hikone. It's on
Hikone.
Biwa, Lake Biwa.
In
Shiga
Kyoto.
Prefecture.
Kyoto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So not a whole lot there, but I definitely was exposed to the more, I guess a lot of people would call it the more authentic Japan, just that sort of lifestyle, being a little bit closer to nature, being a little bit slower, being a little bit less westernized in a lot of ways. I was there for the summer studying Japanese, and this is probably something you'll hear me say multiple times throughout this, but I didn't really get much out of my studies at the program I was at. So I more or less came back to America with the same skill level that I got to Japan.
But you had a lot of fun there.
Yeah, I had fun. It was very hot.
In your LinkedIn profile, you introduce yourself as a podcaster, writer, compulsive learner, and teacher of English as a second language. Which of these roles have connected you better with Japanese people, and how do you nurture these connections?
If I had to choose one, it would probably
or
be...
two.
Yeah.
Can be two also. Which ones?
Honestly, the thing that has connected me most to Japanese people is being a learner. The strongest relationships I've developed in Japan and with Japanese people have been through language exchange.
Yeah.
So what's nice about language exchange is that the people who are interested in learning, especially English, well, it probably applies to any language, to be honest, but people who want to study a different language are naturally more curious people, and they naturally have a more diverse set of interests. So it makes it easier to find people who share those interests with you. So I guess being just a very curious person, wanting to hear other people's stories and things like that have probably been the biggest asset for me in developing and strengthening relationships in Japan.
In your LinkedIn profile, you introduce yourself as a podcaster, writer, compulsive learner, and teacher of English as a second language. Which of these roles have connected you better with Japanese people, and how do you nurture these connections?
If I had to choose one, it would probably
or
be...
two.
Yeah.
Can be two also. Which ones?
Honestly, the thing that has connected me most to Japanese people is being a learner. The strongest relationships I've developed in Japan and with Japanese people have been through language exchange.
Yeah.
So what's nice about language exchange is that the people who are interested in learning, especially English, well, it probably applies to any language, to be honest, but people who want to study a different language are naturally more curious people, and they naturally have a more diverse set of interests. So it makes it easier to find people who share those interests with you. So I guess being just a very curious person, wanting to hear other people's stories and things like that have probably been the biggest asset for me in developing and strengthening relationships in Japan.
Yeah, and that relationship was with you as a teacher, as a student, or working there.
Mm-hmm.
Let us know how was your daily or your most common way of communication on with Japanese people there.
Mm-hmm. To be honest, I don't know how much you think about personality tests. Some people are very into them. Some people are very anti-personality tests. But I think every single personality test I've ever taken in my life, I have gotten 100% introverted.
Really?
So yeah, every single time.
So was honestly, the same there in Japan? Was the same there?
Yes. And that was when I had more anxiety and just a lot more of a barrier in getting to know people in person. So what actually worked best for me was to make friends through language exchange applications. So there are a lot of phone applications, there are websites, there are just a lot of ways to connect with people. And because me being very introverted and shy in a lot of ways, it's easier to get to know people when you have an excuse to get to know them. So you find,
example.
Yeah, because with the language exchange apps, your excuse is that you both want to learn each other's language.
Great.
But that's why people will recommend you join clubs, for example. Like, I like hiking, so I'll go to this hiking club. I like cooking, so I'll do a cooking club. So I just think the best way to develop relationships is to find things that you both have in common and just get to know each other from there.
Definitely. That's one of the probably the best tool to practice to learn your target language, those platforms to exchange language online. I mean, if you're not there, if you don't have the opportunity to talk to people in person. And the second one, as you said, just sharing a common activity, an activity you both of you enjoy. That will definitely make things easier. If we speak about business and professional connections, a profile on LinkedIn is a must. Actually, we met each other on this platform. Let us know, Lydia, how this channel works on your professional activity.
Yeah.
Specifically on the professional one.
Yeah. To me, LinkedIn is probably the most powerful tool I've had. Again, being an extremely introverted person, I was never one to be like, oh, let's go on a bunch of networking activities. That sounds super fun. And I just love walking up to strangers and saying hi to them all the time and telling them about myself. That's never been the case for me. So on a practical level, especially if you're more introverted, it helps a lot to be able to talk about things with people. So people post something and then you make a comment saying, oh, that's interesting. Here's what I think about it. And then you can start connecting with people again over something you're both interested in. So you have a little bit of a deeper relationship from the beginning, like from the very beginning, because you've talked about something that matters to you. And then on the flip side of that, being somebody who is active on the platform, making content, trying to make content to help other people especially. What's great about that is they find you, the people you want to connect with, because they're the people you want to serve. They'll find you. And from there, you connect with them, you see their activities, and they're interacting with people who are interested in the same things as them. So then you see, oh, X person said a comment on this other person's post. And then you're like, oh, that other person looks interesting. I'll connect with them. So it's a really, really positive spiral. You get to connect with so many people that never in a million years would you have even met, let alone have some sort of relationship with. Yeah.
I was searching podcasts on Japanese language and business culture, and your podcast, your channel, Business Success Japan, stood out for the quality of the production and worthwhile content. I really liked it. Tell us about your motivations to start this podcast and the relevance of this tool, of this specific tool, the podcast, on your personal branding.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is that I didn't really have a plan in mind when I made the
Hmm.
podcast. To be honest, before I started the podcast, I had just kind of started a small freelancing business. That was at the beginning of this year, before coronavirus became a thing. I was thinking it would be nice if my students had a way to review the course materials before they went to Japan,
Hmm.
because I know from experience that it's really easy to get overwhelmed and then forget a lot of important things, especially if
Absolutely.
you're going over to a new country. Um, so I was like, oh, I'll just take some of my coursework. I'll make audio versions of it. I adore podcasts. I obsessively listen to podcasts. It's probably not good for me to have so much input all the time, but that's where I am in life. Just constantly listening. I was like, I'll make my own and just make this course material available to my students. Maybe it could be kind of promotional. If I wanted to reach out to other companies, they would get an idea of what I was teaching.
Great.
So I decided to do that. And going back, I had connected actually with Kasia Lynch a while before then, and we email back and forth quite a bit. And she offered to be a guest on the podcast because I think I was saying that, oh, I'm running out of course materials and I don't know what else to do with this podcast. And she offered to be a guest. So she was my first guest. She was a very good, was a very good sport about it, considering I had zero experience interviewing anyone for anything. So from there, I just started reaching out to people. She was kind enough to open up her network to me and be like, you should interview this person. This person's cool too.
Great.
And eventually, because my network was growing slowly, I was able to reach out to people on my own and ask them to be guests. So it was able to grow from there. And now it's all interviews, and I don't have to be the one person talking the whole time, which is great.
The last few episodes are mostly interviews.
Mhm.
So I'm missing those mini lessons, mini Japanese lessons from the very first episodes. Please, お願いします。その短い授業。日本語の授業教えてください。And then business 日本語. Because, sorry for the Japanese, I was just asking her for those short lessons. I invite you to go to the podcast. Please, Lydia, let us know the channels on which we can find Business Success Japan. And what I liked a lot was the specific explanation on business, the use of Japanese language on the business context. So I was requesting to continue those micro classes, micro lessons on Japanese language.
I'm not sure if I have anything that will magically level up your Japanese other than just figure out what your goals are early on as you can. Figure out what you want to get out of your language studies. If it's okay for me to plug one of my episodes, I had Graham Lawrence on, and he spoke a lot about his own experience studying Japanese and the tools he used. He also got into Japanese through karate. So that was kind of an interesting link between his story and yours. But once you know your goals, you have a clear idea of how to get there for sure. So if you want to be conversational, you're going to be approaching it differently than if you want to be able to read manga, for example.
Yeah, of course.
If you want general competency, I found in my experience that I just want to be good at Japanese isn't enough to sustain you, because there's so many different skills involved with that if you're trying to cover all of them at the same time, you feel like you're moving so slowly that you can get discouraged, which is fine when you're a beginner, because every new thing you learn, you're like 100% better, 50% better, 25% better than you were the other day. But as you get to a higher level, it's really important to decide what counts as success for you in your language studies, because otherwise it's really easy to get discouraged. I still get discouraged sometimes.
Exactly. And let us something only between you and me here. Do you study every day Japanese?
I mean, every
Tell me
once
the
in a
truth.
while. No, every once in a while. I don't. But that would be, I don't know, maybe one day a month I don't. Other than that, I'm really consistent. I do get some
Good.
studying.
And how do you study, Lydia? How do you study Japanese? Share it with us.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Pomodoro method.
Yeah, 25 minutes or 20?
I do 25 minutes.
Good.
So basically you just set a timer and you do whatever your activity is for 25 minutes. And then I don't do it right. I usually take the 25 minutes and then I switch to a different task for 25 minutes that I have to do. And then I switch back and forth, which people will probably say isn't the best way to do it. But it works for me because then I'm not just sitting down and like, okay, I'm going to study Japanese for 2 hours and then get distracted every 10 minutes because like, oh, I have 2 hours. It's fine. I don't have to get everything done right now. Whereas if you only have 25 minutes, it's a lot easier to stay focused.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And when you sit down to study Japanese, I'm sorry for being so incisive on that. You say, okay, today I'm going to study only kanji or only vocabulary or only grammar, or you made a mix of 5 minutes kanji, 2 kanjis per day, for example, or 1 kanji on each time you see it, or 1 grammar rule, or I'm going to read and pick all the kanjis I don't know. How do you organize the content of your practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in listening to, I don't know how to say it, listening to how do I say this? Paying attention to how different activities make you feel.
Okay. For example?
So, for example, if you sit down and you study grammar for a while and you just feel like super angry, super frustrated, like I just hate everything, that's okay for, I don't know, up to 15 minutes. But if your whole study time is something that makes you unhappy, your brain, your body, your whole self will eventually make you stop doing that activity. It'll find ways to make you stop. So you should be strict with yourself, but you have to balance it with things that make you happy.
Yeah, like flexibility. The point is like just make it enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure.
Good.
But you should also still be strict with yourself because you do need to get some things done. So just for me, for example, the thing I'm strict with myself with is Anki. Have you heard of the Anki flashcard system?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I make sure to do that every day. And that's kind of the thing that I get done first. And I make sure I do every day that I study is Anki flashcards.
The tough part first.
Yeah. And then after that, I get to read something that I enjoy. Usually it's reading because I really like reading. And I like reading the news, but I try not to read the news because it's honestly not very good for your mental health to do too much. But if it's for studying, then it's fine, right? I love NHK News Web Easy. I still read it every day, to be honest. And what I love about it is if you're a lower level at Japanese, then it just takes more time, and then it ends up taking up your whole study time. And you're like, okay.
And you have the furigana, and the audio is perfect.
You get to set it to your level. But what's really nice about NHK News Web Easy is that as you get better at Japanese, it just takes less time. So maybe one of my Pomodoros will just be NHK News Web Easy. And then after that, I can read the normal Japanese news. But I still get like that. My brain gets to have this feeling of mastery because it's like, oh, I got through all these articles really fast. And you have to make sure, you just have to do things that make your brain happy. Otherwise, your brain will not cooperate with you when you're studying.
That's wise.
Can I tell you my system for using NHK News Web Easy? Because what I do with it is I read it through with the furigana and everything, just looking up the words. Like normally I know most of it now, but sometimes they'll have specialty words in it just because it's a wide range of news. So they'll cover things you don't know, which is also nice. And I'll write those down. I write them down by hand in a notebook. I have a lot of notebooks with my terrible Japanese handwriting in them. And someday they'll all end up in my Anki deck, but I don't worry about that at that point. Because if I turned every word I found into an Anki card, I would never get finished reading.
Yeah. And having, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just read it, write down words I don't know. Then I turn off the furigana and I listen to the voice read the article and I follow along. So my brain starts to like put together the different kanji. Yeah.
Great.
My brain can slowly figure out the kanji. I don't have to be perfect, but I just keep moving. Like I try not to get stuck on like mastering the article because that's not the point. Then after that, I turn the furigana back on and read it myself, trying to imitate what I remember from the Japanese voice, like the intonation and all that.
Okay.
And then if they have the video, I watch the video, which is usually hard. Like I don't get all of it, but you see the words that you saw in the article and you've been exposed to the article 3 times. So you know what it's about.
Yes.
So your brain can pick out stuff from the actual news.
We are on LinkedIn. We might find an interesting topic to talk about. So I hope this is not the last one. Actually, it's the second.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Lydia. Any message, any comment, anything you want to share before leaving us?
Well, just thank everyone for their time. I'm very glad to be of any sort of help I can be for people, especially because Japanese can be so overwhelming. Yeah. Just do what you can to keep at it. That's the most important thing, is just being consistent. You don't have to have the perfect system. You don't have to listen to what people say about this is the only effective way to learn Japanese. That's just, I don't know how to say it other than it's just straight garbage. The way that works for you to learn Japanese is the way that works for you. And you just have to figure it out for yourself. There's no magic pill. You just have to do what you can in the way that's right for you. And just keep going. Don't give up.
Wise. Fantastic. Yeah, thank you for that precious advice. And hope to continue this very nice connection with you with Business Success Japan. I'm going to leave all the contact information on the notes. Great. Thank you very much, Lydia. It was a pleasure. And enjoy your time in Japanese. いろいろありがとうございました。
はい、ありがとうございました。気をつけてくださいね。
じゃあね。
じゃあね。
Bye bye.
Deseo que esta entrega haya sido de tu agrado y que sigas disfrutando con nosotros de lo mejor de Japón para gente creativa. Honto ni arigatou gozaimashita. Muchísimas gracias y seguimos en contacto. Nos vemos. Mata ne.
Oops, I closed my... Sorry. I'm like Japanese guy. Sorry.
Always apologizing about everything.
Yeah. Well, after all this time, you get used to...
I would say was a ari ippon hip hop nihongo. Hiragana, katakana, eigo mo shou gutsu gutsu nikon. Groove する flow. くだらないこと言い合い。